In the complex economy of my family, there were two distinct and unequal currencies. The first was love, but it wasn't the unconditional kind you read about in storybooks. It was loud, conditional, and performative, a glittering currency that was minted exclusively for and lavished upon my younger sister, Ashley. She spent it with a reckless, joyful abandon, always certain the vaults would be magically replenished. And then there was the other currency, responsibility. That was mine. It was quiet, steady, and had to be earned through a decade of silent, often invisible, service. I didn't know it at the time, but the latter would prove to be infinitely more valuable. It wasn't just a currency, it was an education. It would become the foundation upon which I'd have to build a fortress, brick by painstaking brick. My sister was a firework, all bright, dazzling sparks and loud, attention-grabbing bangs, demanding everyone's gaze. I was the one who quietly, dutifully, swept up the charred debris after the show was over. It was a dynamic our family accepted as natural, as the unchangeable order of things. Ashley was the one to be celebrated. I was the one to be relied upon. They never imagined that one day, the reliable one would be the only one left standing, holding the keys to the kingdom they all believed was theirs. My grandparents, Thomas and Eleanor, were the bedrock of my life, the quiet center of my world. When they began their slow, inevitable decline, when the cruel fog of age began to roll in and obscure the brilliant people they had been, my role as the family's responsible one solidified. From a vague job description into a full-time, unpaid profession. Ashley, then in her early 20s, was far too busy living her best, most Instagrammable life. She was a whirlwind of bottomless brunches, exotic vacations funded by our parents under the guise of finding herself, and a string of handsome, interchangeable fiancés. She was far too occupied building her personal brand to be bothered with the quiet, unglamorous, and deeply unphotogenic work of caretaking. Her visits to my grandparents' rambling old house on Maple Drive were rare, brief, and meticulously performative. She would breeze in, a flurry of air kisses and expensive perfume, stage a few smiling selfies with a vaguely confused grandma, post them with a heartfelt caption about the importance of family, and then rush off to her next, more important engagement. So, I stepped into the void she left behind. For 10 years, I was the one. I was the one who created a color-coded chart to manage their bewildering array of daily medications. I was the one who drove them to their endless litany of doctors, appointments, sitting for hours in sterile waiting rooms, reading novels while they were being poked and prodded. I was the one who sat with my grandmother for entire afternoons as her memory faded, listening to the same cherished stories of her youth over and over, pretending each time that I was hearing them for the first time. I was the one who learned to cook my grandfather's favorite, incredibly finicky pot roast just the way his mother used to make it, a recipe that took me 6 months to perfect. I was the one who held his frail, paper-thin hand in the sterile, beeping quiet of the hospital room during his final days, whispering to him that it was okay to let go. It was never a burden, not for a single day. It was an honor. It was love, expressed not in loud declarations or grand gestures, but in the steady, daily, unrelenting rhythm of showing up. My parents saw my dedication as my duty, the natural role for the quiet, unmarried daughter. My grandparents, I would soon learn, saw it as something much, much more. The will was read 1 week to the day after my grandfather's funeral. We gathered in the stuffy, wood-paneled office of their longtime attorney, a kind but frail man named Mr. Abernathy. My parents, Mark and Diane, were there, their faces arranged in masks of solemn grief. Ashley was there, dressed in a chic black dress that was probably more expensive than my car, looking profoundly bored and surreptitiously checking her phone under the mahogany table. They were all expecting a standard, even split of the estate, an outcome that would have suited them perfectly, as Ashley's portion would have undoubtedly been absorbed into their collective family fund of enabling her extravagant lifestyle. Mr. Abernathy, his hands trembling slightly, put on his reading glasses and began to read from the thick document. The language was formal, archaic, a river of whereases and heretofores. After a few small bequests to my grandparents' favorite charities, he arrived at the main disposition of the estate. And as for the remainder of my estate, he read, his voice steadying as he reached the crucial passage, including my home and property located at 123 Maple Drive, all financial accounts, investments, and personal property, I bequeath it, in its entirety, without reservation, to my beloved granddaughter, Megan Carter. The silence that followed was not a peaceful silence. It was a vacuum, sucking all the air out of the room. Ashley's head snapped up from her phone, her perfectly made-up face a mask of pure, unadulterated disbelief. My father's jaw went slack, his mouth hanging slightly open. But it was my mother's face that I watched, that I had been steeling myself to watch. I saw the initial shock curdle into something else, something dark and ugly and deeply resentful. It was a look I knew all too well. It was the look of a plan being thwarted, of a deeply held entitlement being denied. Mr. Abernathy, perhaps sensing the brewing storm, quickly continued. My grandparents have included a personal addendum, which they asked me to read. His voice softened. They write, our granddaughter, Megan, was our rock. She gave us the greatest gift a person can give, her time, her patience, and her unwavering love when we needed it most. This inheritance is not a reward. It is a repayment of a debt of gratitude we can never truly satisfy. It is our deepest and most fervent wish that she has a place of security, peace, and happiness for the rest of her life. She has earned it. It was a beautiful, profound validation of a decade of my life, a secret I had held in my heart. But as I sat there, a lump forming in my throat, I couldn't fully appreciate it, because I saw the cold fury in my mother's eyes, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of a war. They would not let this stand. I didn't grieve for my grandfather in the traditional sense. My grief was an action plan. My grief was a strategy meeting with myself. I knew my family. I knew their playbook. They would see my grandparents' heartfelt wishes not as sacred, but as a temporary and unjust obstacle. They would wheedle. They would guilt. They would emotionally blackmail. They would manipulate. And if all else failed, they would engage in outright subterfuge. I decided, in that stuffy lawyer's office, that I would not be a passive victim in their drama. I would be a strategist. My first move, before the ink was even dry on the probate documents, was to hire my own lawyer. I didn't go to a folksy, small-town family attorney like Mr. Abernathy. I went to the city and found a shark, a brilliant, tough-as-nails estate attorney in her 40s who specialized in contested wills and complex asset protection. One chose her because her online reviews consistently used words like ruthless, unflappable, and a brilliant tactician. Her name was Victoria Martinez, and she was exactly what I needed. At her guidance, I took a crucial, proactive step that would become the cornerstone of my entire defense. I did not take direct ownership of the property. I did not have the deed put in my name. Instead, we created a fortress, a legally shielded, ironclad, nearly impenetrable irrevocable trust. We called it the Maple Drive Legacy Trust. I placed the entire estate, the house, the savings accounts, the stocks, the vintage car in the garage, every single asset into this trust. As the sole trustee, I had full and exclusive control, but the ownership, on paper, belonged to the trust itself, a separate and distinct legal entity. This simple act made the estate exponentially harder to attack, to challenge the trust. They wouldn't just be challenging me, they'd be challenging a legally constructed entity with its own rights and protections. But we didn't stop there. Victoria was a master of defensive layers. We took further steps to obscure the ownership trail, to make the fortress invisible. The utilities for the house, water, gas, electricity were transferred not to my name, but to a registered business name I created for this purpose, a simple LLC with a generic name. The property taxes were set up to be paid automatically from a new bank account, opened solely in the name of the trust, to any outside observer, to anyone doing a simple online property search. At the county records office, my name would not be directly attached to the house. It was a ghost asset, hidden in plain sight. And the most important part of the strategy, the part that required the most discipline, I told no one, not a single soul. My parents, my sister, my well-meaning aunts and uncles, they all assumed I was just a naive, quiet girl who had inherited a house. They had no idea I had built a castle and raised the drawbridge. I let them believe I was vulnerable. It was the most important element of the trap I was quietly, patiently, meticulously setting. The first wave of the attack came 3 months after probate closed. On a crisp Saturday morning in October, I had been living in my grandparents' house. The silence a welcome balm after years of the constant, low-level hum of caregiving. I was slowly and lovingly sorting through their belongings, honoring their memories, deciding what to keep and what to donate. It had been peaceful to peaceful. They arrived unannounced, as I knew they would. My mother and Ashley. They didn't knock. They used their old key and walked right into the living room where I was packing books into a box. Their faces arranged in identical expressions of smug, predatory triumph. "Megan," my mother began, her voice dripping with a false, cloying sympathy that made the hair on my arms stand up. "We need to talk. There's been a development, a legal one, a development," I asked, keeping my voice carefully neutral, my heart rate steady. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind 100 times. Ashley stepped forward, holding a piece of official-looking paper like a royal decree. She was positively glowing with self-satisfaction. "It seems there was a mistake in the will," she said, a cruel little smile playing on her lips. "A legal oversight regarding the chain of title. Mom and I had our lawyer look into it, and we've had it corrected." She held up the paper. "This is a new title for the house. It's been transferred to my name. It's what Grandma and Grandpa would have wanted, really. For the house to stay with someone who will, you know, have a proper family in it one day." The implication that my single, childless status made me an unworthy steward of the family home was a classic Ashley move, a poisoned dart wrapped in a compliment. I glanced at the document she was holding. It looked official enough to a layperson. It had seals and signatures, but I knew what it was. It was a worthless piece of paper. It was a ghost trying to haunt a fortress. "So," my mother continued, her tone shifting from sympathetic to commanding, the mask of concern dropping away. "We're going to need you to pack up your things. We're going to be generous about it. You can have until the end of the week, but then you need to be out. Ashley has a contractor coming on Friday to get quotes for the kitchen renovation." I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't pull out the thick folder of trust documents from the desk drawer. That wasn't the plan. The plan required them to take the next step, to escalate, to walk, with their eyes wide open, directly into the trap. "I understand," I said, my voice quiet and even. "Thank you for letting me know." Their faces registered a flash of surprise. They had come prepared for a fight, for tears, for a dramatic, messy scene. My calm, immediate compliance seemed to unnerve them, but their inherent arrogance quickly won out. They saw it as weakness, as my inevitable, pathetic submission to their superior will. They left a few minutes later, confident in their swift and total victory. They didn't even give me a week. They gave me 2 days. On Monday morning, a massive 26-foot U-Haul truck rumbled down the quiet, tree-lined street and parked at the curb in front of the house, its brakes hissing. My mother's white luxury SUV pulled up right behind it. She and Ashley got out, dressed in what looked like designer workout clothes, ready for the hard work of supervising. They were accompanied by 2 burly movers who looked confused and out of place in our quiet, suburban neighborhood. But I was ready. The storm had arrived, just as I had predicted, and I was not waiting inside, cowering behind a locked door. I was sitting on the wide front porch swing, a place of countless happy memories with my grandparents, slowly sipping a cup of coffee. And I was not alone. Sitting in a rocking chair beside me, dressed in a crisp, conservative suit and holding a worn leather briefcase on his lap, was Mr. Robert Davidson, a senior official from the County Office of Property Records. He was a stern, no-nonsense man in his 60s, a personal friend of my lawyer, who had been intrigued by my case and had graciously agreed to be present for this moment. Pro bono, my mother and Ashley stopped dead at the foot of the porch steps, their smug, triumphant expressions faltering when they saw I wasn't alone. "Megan, what is this?" my mother demanded, her voice sharp with annoyance. "Who is this man?" "We told you we were coming today." Double quotes. Mr. Davidson slowly and deliberately stood up, his 5'8" frame suddenly radiating an unimpeachable, bureaucratic authority. "Good morning, ladies," he said, his voice calm, level, and official. "My name is Robert Davidson. I'm the deputy assessor for this county. Megan here called my office, concerned about a potential misunderstanding regarding the legal ownership of this property." He opened his briefcase and produced a thick file. "I have the official county records right here. According to our office, the property at 123 Maple Drive is not owned by Megan Carter, nor is it owned by Ashley Carter." Ashley's face went chalk white. My mother looked utterly, profoundly bewildered. "The property," Mr. Davidson continued, his gaze as sharp and unyielding as a surveyor's plumb line, "is legally and irrevocably owned by the Maple Drive Legacy Trust, established on July 14th of this year. The quitclaim deed you filed last week," he said, looking directly at Ashley, his eyes narrowing, "is therefore fraudulent. Attempting to seize property based on a fraudulent legal document is a very serious matter. It can be, and often is, prosecuted as a felony offense." He then turned his attention to the 2 movers, who were frozen by the U-Haul, looking like they wanted to be anywhere else on earth. "And as for you gentlemen, I would advise you not to set 1 foot on this property. You would be participating in an illegal act of trespassing and attempted theft." I suggest you get back in your truck and leave this neighborhood immediately." The movers didn't need to be told twice. They practically dove into the cab of the U-Haul, their faces a mixture of fear and relief. Davidson looked back at my mother and sister. Their faces had gone from smug to shocked to horrified in the space of 90 seconds. "I trust we are all clear on the legal status of this property now. Any further attempts to enter or take possession of this property will be met with a police response, and I will personally see to it that the district attorney is notified. Good day, ladies." He gave them a curt, dismissive nod, then turned to me. "I think my work here is done, Megan. A pleasure to be of service. Call Ms. Martinez if you have any more trouble." He walked calmly down the steps, got into his modest sedan, and drove away. My mother and Ashley just stood there on the sidewalk, their mouths slightly agape. They had come for a surrender. They had come for my humiliation. Instead, they had been met with a perfectly executed, legally verified checkmate. The U-Haul truck sputtered to life and rumbled away, a monument to their failed coup. They had lost the first battle spectacularly, but I knew, looking at the pure, unadulterated fury in their eyes, that the war was far from over. Humiliation, for people like my mother and sister, is not a catalyst for self-reflection. It is not a moment for learning or growth. It is fuel. It is gasoline thrown on the fire of their own entitlement. They didn't retreat to lick their wounds. They reloaded. They doubled down. A week after the U-Haul showdown, a certified letter arrived in my mailbox. It was from a shark of a different kind, a notoriously aggressive family law attorney whose smirking face was plastered on billboards all over the city. The letter was a masterpiece of fiction, audacity, and legal gaslighting. It claimed that I, the quiet, dutiful granddaughter, had exerted undue influence on my grandfather, a man known for his stubborn independence, manipulating him in his dotage. It claimed that my mother, as the natural heir, had suffered extreme and debilitating emotional distress as a result of being unjustly and cruelly cut out of her rightful inheritance. And it concluded with a breathtaking demand. I was to dissolve the trust immediately, agree to joint ownership of the house with my mother, and pay her a sum of $150,000 in damages for her pain and suffering. If I did not comply within 30 days, they would file a lawsuit and take me to court. It was a declaration of total war. They were no longer just trying to take the house through trickery. They were trying to publicly destroy my character, assassinate my reputation, and bleed me dry financially. I immediately scanned the letter and emailed it to my lawyer, Victoria Martinez. She called me back within 10 minutes, and I could hear the glee in her voice. "Oh, this is good, Megan," she said, her voice full of a lawyer's predatory excitement. "This is a gift. This is a tactical error of the highest magnitude. They've put their baseless accusations and their extortionate demands in writing. They've handed us the rope to hang them with." Victoria filed a blistering response, a cease and desist letter that not only rejected their absurd demands, but also put them on formal notice of our intention to seek sanctions against them for filing a frivolous lawsuit. But she didn't stop there. She launched her own, deeper investigation into the fraudulent title transfer. It didn't take her long, with the help of a private investigator, to uncover the whole sordid truth. She hired a forensic document examiner, a retired FBI agent, to analyze the fraudulent deed. The results were damning and unequivocal. The notary stamp used on the document was a cheap, counterfeit stamp, purchased online from a novelty website, and the signature of the notary public was a clear, unambiguous, and frankly, amateurish forgery of a real notary's name, a woman who, it turned out, had been on a cruise in the Caribbean on the day the document was supposedly signed and stamped in Michigan. We had her sworn affidavit, complete with airline tickets and cruise ship boarding passes. This changes the game entirely, Megan, Victoria told me over the phone, her voice grim and serious now. This isn't just a civil matter anymore. Your sister didn't just make a mistake. She committed multiple felonies. Forgery of a legal document, identity theft of a public official, and filing a false instrument with a government office. We have her cold. This has now escalated to a serious criminal level. The stakes had just been raised exponentially. While the legal battle was heating up, my mother, perhaps sensing the weakness of their legal position, launched a second front, a brutal, scorched earth war of narratives. She resorted to her true talent, gossip, manipulation, and the masterful performance of victimhood. She began a systematic smear campaign, calling every relative we had, near and far, from my father's cousins in Ohio to her own childhood friends in Florida. The story she spun was a heart-wrenching, cinematic work of fiction. In her version, I was a cold, calculating, emotionally stunted monster. I had taken advantage of a sweet, confused old man, isolating him from his loving family. I had poisoned him against his own daughter, the one who loved him most. I had stolen the family home through trickery and was now trying to bankrupt my own grieving, heartbroken mother. She wept on the phone. She played the part of the wronged matriarch with an Oscar-worthy performance. And because she was the loud one, the dramatic one, the one everyone was used to listening to, many of them, to my horror, believed her. The calls and texts started coming in, a relentless barrage of family pressure. Aunts, uncles, cousins. Some were openly angry, accusing me of being heartless and greedy. Others were full of pitying, condescending concern, urging me to do the right thing and make peace with your poor mother. The pressure was immense, a coordinated emotional assault designed to isolate me, to wear me down, and to force me to surrender. The warning shot, the thing that told me I had to act, came from a cousin on my father's side, a quiet woman named Sarah whom I'd always liked. Megan, you need to know what your mother is saying, she told me in a hushed, apologetic phone call. She's turning everyone against you. She's telling people you forged the will. It's getting ugly. You have to do something. I knew she was right. I couldn't let my mother's lies become the official, accepted family history. This wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about my name, my integrity, my relationship with the few family members I still cared about. I called Victoria. It's time, I said, my voice cold and resolute. It's time to end this. For good. We spent the next 2 days compiling what we came to call the packet of truth. It was a comprehensive, undeniable, and utterly devastating statement of facts. We were meticulous. We didn't include emotional appeals or angry accusations. We just included the cold, hard, documented evidence. The packet contained a clear, concise, one-page timeline of events written by Victoria in unambiguous legal language, a full copy of my grandparents' will, with the personal addendum explaining their wishes highlighted in yellow, a high-resolution color copy of the fraudulent title my sister had filed, the complete, multi-page sworn affidavit from the forensic document examiner, detailing the forged signature and the counterfeit notary stamp, complete with photographic evidence, a copy of the threatening legal letter from my mother's attorney, demanding $150,000 in damages, and finally, The finishing touch, a collection of screenshots. Screenshots of text messages and social media posts from various relatives, quoting the specific lies my mother had been telling them, proving her deliberate campaign of misinformation. It was a mountain of irrefutable proof, a legal and emotional nuclear bomb. We made 22 copies, and on a Friday afternoon, I went to the post office and mailed a packet, via priority mail with delivery confirmation, to every single relative my mother had contacted. The truth was in the mail, and it was about to be delivered. The implosion was swift, total, and spectacular. The packets arrived at homes across 5 different states on a Saturday morning. My phone started ringing around noon, but this time, the calls were of a completely different nature. It was my Uncle David, my father's older brother, his voice shaking with a rage I had never heard from him. "Megan, I just read every single page of what you sent. I am speechless. The forgery, the fake notary. I feel like a complete fool. I am so sorry I ever doubted you. What your mother and sister have done is a disgrace to this family's name." It was my Aunt Mary, my mother's own sister, weeping into the phone. "I feel like such an idiot for believing her. How could she lie to me like that? How could she do this to you? After everything you did for Mom and Dad." The tide didn't just turn, it was a tsunami. The family, armed with the undeniable, black and white truth, turned their collective fury on my mother and Ashley. The smear campaign had backfired catastrophically. The professional consequences for Ashley were severe. My Uncle David, a man with a rigid moral compass and a belief in consequences, filed a formal ethics complaint against her with the state real estate board, including a full copy of our packet as evidence. With irrefutable proof of forgery and fraud, her career, which had been her entire identity, her source of pride and arrogance, imploded. Her license was suspended, pending an investigation that also led to criminal charges being filed by the district attorney's office. She was no longer a glamorous firework. She was a dumpster fire. My mother, faced with the complete and utter collapse of her narrative, the public exposure of her lies, and the ostracism of her entire extended family, finally surrendered. She didn't call to apologize. She was, and is, constitutionally incapable of such an act. But a week after the packets went out, my lawyer received a terse, one-sentence letter from her attorney. It stated that his client was withdrawing her lawsuit and ceasing any and all claims against me and the estate, effective immediately. She went silent. The angry calls, the manipulative texts, the drama, the noise, it all just stopped. She had been so thoroughly, so publicly, so methodically exposed that she had no moves left to make. She had been checkmated, not by me, but by her own lies and the simple, unassailable power of the truth. The story ends not with a bang, not with a shouted victory, but with a profound and satisfying quiet. I am sitting on the front porch swing of my grandparents' house. My house. The autumn air is crisp and cool, and the scent of my grandmother's rose bushes, still stubbornly blooming, is thick in the air. It is peaceful. Ashley took a plea deal, receiving 2 years of probation, a hefty fine, and community service. She can never hold a real estate license again. She and my mother have become islands, isolated from the family they once ruled through manipulation and drama. I have no contact with them, not out of anger anymore, but out of a deep and abiding need for peace. I have built my fortress, and the gates are permanently closed. I did not just protect my inheritance. I did not just defend a house. I honored the quiet, steady love of my grandparents by refusing to let their final wishes be trampled. I defended their memory, and in doing so, I learned that true strength isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's the quiet, meticulous, thankless work of building a fortress, of gathering evidence, of patiently waiting for the right moment, and of letting the truth, in its own time, have the final, unassailable word. The storm has passed, and I am, at long last, home.